In this lecture of Understanding CouchDB, we're going to discuss differences between CouchDB and relational databases. You may already be familiar with relational databases such as MySQL, Oracle DB, MS SQL, Microsoft Access. Now there's a lot of differences among those different types of databases, so this is a broad generalization about them. So there will be some differences as you go from type to type. In the traditional relational database model, we start with a table. I've created a list of musicians with a few bits of information about them. The information at the top of the table is the schema. This has to be defined ahead of time. So when the database is first created, one of the first things that's done is adding each of these columns. Now let's say I want to add more information. I want to include what instruments these people play and what bands they may have been involved in. Well, this becomes a problem for two reasons. One is it can vary wildly from 0 to a large number, so either I have to create extra columns or I create additional tables. These tables are linked. You see that the ID number in the first column in both tables corresponds to someone from the original table. This is a really very simple way of explaining the relational database model. Now if I want to make queries from this, for example, let's say I want to look just at those musicians who've passed away. Okay, from the musicians database, I'm going to select the year that they died and the stage name. It's going to sort just people whose year of death is listed, and then it's going to sort it by that field as well. And then you see underneath the results. This is a very simple overview of what a relational database looks like. And again, it does vary from database to database how these work, exactly what the SQL queries look like. But this is a good starting point for comparison. So let's compare this to how CouchDB would store the same information. This is a JSON document. Everything is self-contained. All the same information is in there. Additionally, instruments and bands are part of the main document. They're in no way linked in from other sources. Notice in this record, year of death is listed as null because she's still alive, but that's actually not necessary to include. I could just eliminate it entirely, and null is just going to be implied. So in a relational database, you need to have the column for everybody because it's a table. But in CouchDB, the same fields do not need to be involved in each record. And again, because CouchDB is schemaless, additional information can be quickly added to the database for any record without having to add extra columns or extra tables. So I can throw in miscellaneous facts at any place or any kind of field without having to first tell CouchDB I'm going to do it. So we looked at what a SQL query would look like. This is what a MapReduce query would look like. These are two queries. First is similar to the one that we used earlier when I was showing you the relational databases. This is just pulling out a list of people who have passed away, and it's going to give us the same information. And it also is going to show you the reduce section down below, which is going to give you a count of the nationalities of the musicians listed in the database. So in the first query, what gets returned is an ID number, a key, and a value. In this case, I set the key and value in the emit section, which is year of death, and stage name. And with the nationality query, again, this is the reduce section of the MapReduce functions. We're returned a key value system where the key is the nationality and the value is the count of people in the database of that nationality. In CouchDB 2.0 and Cloudant, there is an additional query language called Mango, which is heavily based on MongoDB's query system. And in this case, I'm again recreating the list of musicians who've died. I'm going to output the year that they died, their stage name, and their real name. And in this case, I'm going to limit it to just 3. And this is the kind of result that you get back. So how is CouchDB different from relational databases? So it stores documents instead of records or rows or tuples or whatever that particular database calls it. And it uses key values instead of columns. The data for a document is self-contained. Instead of linked and joined tables, all the data related to a particular document is self-contained within that document. CouchDB uses multi-version concurrency control instead of locks. So CouchDB will have multiple versions of the same file. It distributes it around the cluster, and it uses a revision number to keep track of where it is in the multi-version system. There are a few things at work here. First, this means that if a document is being updated, everybody still will have access to the current version of it. Relational databases can lock out users from records that are being updated. In order to update a document, you need the most recent revision number. That's something we'll get into more when we talk about documents. Again, CouchDB is schemaless. The data does not need to be predefined, and it can be altered as needed as you go along. In CouchDB, you upload documents instead of inserting values into columns, rows, or tables. CouchDB uses design documents with MapReduce instead of the SQL language that relational databases tend to use. With a relational database management system, you need to know what your data will look like before you begin. And with a CouchDB, you need to know how you will use your data before you begin. This is one of the most important differences between them. This is related to design documents and the fact that it's schemaless. So with relational database, you need to be able to model your data before everything gets inserted. While it's possible to add columns and tables afterwards, generally you need everything as much in place as possible. In CouchDB, with design documents, you need to have a rough idea as to how you're going to want to search for your data. And it's certainly also worth noting that relational databases have been around a long time, and they're ubiquitous. They're available everywhere. CouchDB and NoSQL databases are relatively new. If you sign up for a hosting account with GoDaddy or any of the large hosts, chances are what you're getting is a MySQL database to use for your website's data. So they're everywhere. There's a lot of material for them. There's books, there's classes. CouchDB is relatively new, and it's also evolving quite rapidly. Version 2.0 that came out in late 2016 has a number of differences from the earlier versions, and there were already a lot of plans for changes in the next version to come. Again, that was a broad look at relational databases and how CouchDB differs from them. And which database you use depends on the project that you're working with. But I certainly think that CouchDB is worth a try.